Hello, I'm Stephen Garvey, founder, leader of National Citizens Alliance, NCA. I would like to thank you for joining me tonight. This is a special presentation. It's an introduction to the December 8th public rally against the United Nations and global world order. Tonight, I'm going to go over some of the main reasons why Canadians should oppose the UN and the global world order. I can't go into everything tonight because there's so many layers and layers to this global world order, but I'm going to touch on the main points that I believe Canadians need to know. The first thing we got to get straight is, what does global world order mean and who does it pertain to? Global world order typically pertains to one world government, but generally it is about globalist institutions, governments, entities, literally controlling the world, controlling all people. And these organizations, the global world order, is comprised of globalists, globalist politicians, globalist governments, the United Nation entities, the central banking cartel is linked into it, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the, the Bank of International Settlements, the UN Population Fund, UNICEF, all these UN entities are tied into what's called the global world order. In Canada, the global world order is being pushed by the federal government, provincial governments, municipal governments, and nonprofit entities. And I'm going to go into that right now. I have a slide here I just want to show you. That's on the UN there. It's right up here. Here it is. So this is this right here shows you this is based on 2015. These are the cities in Canada that support Agenda 230, Agenda 21. And I'm not going to list them all, but there's City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, City of Sudbury, City of Guelph, City of Hamilton, City of Kitchener, City of Mississauga, City of Regina, City of Toronto, City of Vancouver. And then there's Fort St. John, Red Deer, Region of York, Town Aurora, Town of Oakville, Ville de Montreal, and so on. So this is at the municipal level. And then the federal government supports this. And we can go to right here. This is on the federal government website. It says Agenda 2030, Agenda for Sustainable Development. And in September 2015, the Harper regime, along with 192 other UN member states, adopted 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This is a 15-year global framework centered on 17 so-called Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets, and 230 indicators. And if we go down here, in the budget in 2018, the new federal government announced it would provide 49.4 million of your tax dollars to this Agenda 2030 over 13 years. And what's really troubling is they're using Statistics Canada to monitor Canadians and report activities on this agenda. And the government of Canada is also proposing to provide from existing departmental resources up to 59.8 million of your tax dollars over 13 years for programming to support the implementation of these so-called sustainable development goals. And this was just released in April 17th, 2018 by Global Affairs Canada, which is part of the federal government. And it talks about attaining the 17 so-called sustainable development goals. And this, which were passed by Harper regime in the UN General Assembly in 2015, September. And it's about the money again. And if we look at this page here, this is only pertaining to Alberta, but this is funded by the Global Affairs Canada, which is part of the federal government. This is called the Alberta Council for Global Cooperation, and it's about implementing Agenda 230, Agenda 21 in Alberta, and we have these in all provinces, different forms, working with the provincial governments to implement this agenda. See, transforming our world to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. There's indoctrination in the classrooms, classroom materials, transforming our schools, our province, our world. That's what they're doing. So this is all going on. This is all going on, mistake not, in Canada. And it doesn't matter. All these globalist mainstream parties support this agenda, which is Agenda 21. And now I'm going to go into why you should be concerned about this. The key point that we think you need to be aware of is this Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, seeks to deprive countries of their national sovereignty, because it's about a global world order being dictated by that order on countries. They want to erode, they want to eliminate Canadian national sovereignty. And they want to replace it with what Trudeau called in 2015 post-national state. That's what they want to do. This is very troubling. And I'm going to get further into this later on when I look at the UN Migration Pact tonight. Another thing they want to do, which is really troubling through the global world order, is create what's called global citizenry, which would replace Canadian citizenry. And these so-called global citizens would have the same rights as us, and they would have access to our country. And what they're doing to facilitate this is mass immigration. Mass immigration has been going on steadily, regardless of what globalist mainstream party is in power, since the 1990s. And I will show data on that. Basically, what's happening, this is rapid, radical, organized replacement of Canada's traditional populations. And the data shows that. Canada is literally being radically transformed into a post-national, globalist, UN-like village. We will not have a distinct identity, distinct culture, distinct values, distinct heritage. Statues are being torn down. Euro-Canadians are being pushed down. And just the other day, there were all this spin in Ottawa about wanting to protect Francophone culture and heritage. It's all spin. It's not true. As long as you're supporting mass immigration, you are against the traditional population of Canada. That is a fact. And I will show the data. This is demographic data of Canada. Um, it's from the mass immigration. I'm going to shift to this here. This actually is showing the data coming in right here. This is the mass immigration coming in, and you can see it here. Since 2000, 2001, it's been steady right across the board, irrespective of which globalist mainstream party is in power. And look under Harper, and then under Trudeau, except for 2016, it's been pretty much the same mass immigration. I'm going to try and break up the image. Oh, I got it right here. Sorry about that. I want to show you this image now. So this shows the demographic reality of Canada, what's happening with mass immigration. And you can see the trajectory since 1981. This is visible minority population. Through the mass immigration, it is increasing in terms of total population. In 1981, it was 4.7%. 2001, 13.4%. And 2016, 22.3%. And there's a projection of 34.4% in 2036. And there's been estimates by 2100, it will reach 80% plus. That means Canada's traditional population will be 20% or less of the population. That is the dramatic, radical transformation that's taking place in Canada. The traditional population is literally being replaced by the federal government. That is what's happening. It's very troubling. And if I can go back to that data there, you can see there, again, 34 up to 80%. And that means by 2100, like I said, less than 20%. To put this in context, in 1960, Euro Canadians represented 97% of Canada's total population. If things continue, they'll be less than 20 by 2100. Very troubling. I'm just going to shift on. I just want to touch on one aspect of the mass immigration, is that a lot of these globalist mainstream politicians like Scheer, Bernay, Rempel, Kenny, they like to tell you that immigration, and by extension mass immigration, is good for the economy. That's what they say. We disagree. We believe mass immigration is only good for select commercial interests like speculators, banks, low wage employers, developers, and also these globalist mainstream parties that get votes from these new immigrants coming in our country. We believe the majority of the Canadian people do not benefit. And we're going to back this up with facts right now. As most Canadian families know, and businesses, we as a people are overburdened with excessive, extreme taxation. Canadians' families are facing 43.6% total income tax or more, depending on which province you live. Based on our calculations, Canadian families are paying 89 cents in tax on every dollar earned. 89 cents on every dollar earned, and that's total taxation on the Canadian families. They're left with 11 cents. 11 cents to pay for their shelter, to pay for their clothes, to pay for their children. They have no money to start up businesses. That is a reality. Another thing, over the past 40 years of this mass immigration, personal debt has increased 5 times. Inflation. From 1973 to 2017, the Consumer Price Index has increased by 432%. That means your dollar in your pocket has 432% less value in terms of consumer purchasing power. That's called inflation. Yet, over the past 40 years, average wages of Canadians have not budged. So the Canadian dollar is worth way less, yet you're getting paid the same. Another issue is housing. 80% of housing costs due to immigration, mass immigration, are due to that. Interest rates have remained low for Canadian families that make minimal profit from their savings. Even if you put savings, you're getting almost nothing back. Yet the housing costs have soared in major centers across Canada to the point that Canadian families cannot afford to buy a home. If we look at Vancouver, the average price of a house now is over $1 million. The average price of a condo is just under $700,000 a year. In Toronto, the average house cost of a house right now is over $765,000. Unemployment. Currently, the government rate is at 5.9%. But we believe this value is way undervalued. Because as soon as a Canadian who's unemployed stops looking for work, they're no longer considered unemployed. Not to mention, someone who is not even looking for work at the beginning is not even included in the statistics as unemployed. So we believe the number is closer to 10% or more. And yet we're told by the globalist mainstream politicians that mass immigration is good for the economy. The facts tell a different story. And you just need, you know because you're living it out there. Most Canadians can barely make ends meet and they're living paycheck to paycheck. I'm going to shift now. I'm going to look at the UN Migration Pact to give you an idea of what's happening with the UN Global Order and the United Nations. This UN Migration Pact, and it's very important everyone remembers this, is a non-binding legal agreement. And this is the pact right here. I'm going to bring it up. This is the pact. And it's a 34-page document. And Canada agreed to this document in January of 2018. And shortly later this month, we're very confident that they will be signing on to this UN Migration Pact. If Trudeau does not sign on to this, it would be a admit of complete failure of his policies. So we believe 99.99% sure that Trudeau will sign Canada onto this pact. But rest assured, this is a non-legal binding pact. That means it is a voluntary agreement. That's a good thing. And we can easily get out of it If NEC comes to power, we will exit from this on day one. No issues asked. But I don't want people to worry too much about this because this globalist agenda is going to go on regardless of the UN Migration Pact. And the key aspects of this pact that you need to know: one, it is about open borders and erosion of Canadian sovereignty. Two, it's about replacing Canadian citizenry with global citizenry. And third, it's about censorship and control over media. And I'm going to show these things now. I'm going to go into the policy right now to help inform people. So this is at the beginning of it. It talks about national sovereignty. And I'm going to read this quote. It says, the Global Compact, which is the UN Migration Pact, refers to the sovereign right of states to determine their national migration policy, their prerogative to govern migration within their jurisdiction in conformity with international law. That's fine. But then it says, within their sovereign jurisdictions, states may distinguish between regular and irregular migration status, which Canada is already doing, including as they determine their legislative and policy measures for the implementation of the Global Pact. So that's the key point here in this statement. It's kind of a double speak right here. They're talking about national sovereignty, but then they say there's an expectation that the Canadian government will legislate and implement policy measures for the implementation of the Global Pact. And that's very troubling. And that's what Canada has agreed to, and we're confident, disappointingly, that they will sign on to that. The second point here, this is dealing with data collection, which is in the pact, and they're already doing it in Agenda 230, Agenda 21 across Canada. They're collecting data on you and your family, and they have certain parameters that they're looking towards in terms of demographics, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of population total, percentage of migrants in the country. So they're talking about getting data, assessing migration trends, national data collection, national statistics. So that's very troubling. So they're using Statistics Canada to implement this agenda, which the Canadian people had no say over. Not a single government in Canada, federal, provincial, municipal, asked the people whether they would support Agenda 230, Agenda 21. This is all top down, and this is all about the global world order. They do not care what you think. They are controlling you, and now they're using Statistics Canada to collect data on you. It's very troubling. This third point here, it says here, quote, provide newly arrived migrants with targeted, gender-responsive, child-sensitive, accessible, comprehensive information and legal guidance on their rights and obligations, including on compliance with national and local laws, obtaining work and resident permits, status adjustments, registration with authorities, access to justice to file complaints about rights violations, and the key point here, access to basic services in Canada. So Canada has agreed to and signed on to ensure that any migrant coming into the country, whether regular, irregular, legal, illegal, has access to basic services such as health care, social services, etc. They also have access to legal rights in Canada. They can file complaints of rights abuse, etc. So this is global citizenry. This is the global citizenry coming into play. And this part of the compact goes into it further. It says, quote, incorporate the health needs of migrants into national and local healthcare policy plans. And then it talks about provide inclusive, equitable, quality education to migrant children and youth. So it's not only talking about accessing our health care for these so-called irregular migrants, regular migrants, but access to our educational systems. Unbelievable. So this is what is called a global citizen, and this is what they're pushing on Canadian people. And we argue that the government should be focused on our people, our country, our citizens first, and most importantly, first. But what they're doing is creating the global citizen. Unbelievable. Okay, this aspect of the compact, it says promote mutual respect for the cultures, traditions, and customs of communities of destination and of migrants by exchanging and implementing best practices on integration policy, programs, and activities. And then it goes on to say here, this is the key point, support multicultural activities through sports, music, arts, culinary festivals, volunteering, and other social events that will facilitate mutual understanding and appreciation of migrant cultures and those of destination communities. Again, this is pushing multiculturalism on us, and it's basically consistent with what's going on in Canada through the Canadian Multiculturalism Act, which mandates the federal government to promote and enhance foreign cultures in Canada. So not only do these irregular, illegal migrants have access to our health care, they have access to our educational system, our social services. We have to accommodate their cultures and respect them as equal to ours. Unbelievable. But that's what Canada agreed to and is going to sign on to. This aspect of the act, it talks, this is very troubling here. It says, quote, engage migrants, political, religious, and community leaders, as well as educators and service providers to detect and prevent incidents of intolerance, racism, xenophobia, and other forms of discrimination against migrants who may be irregular or regular, and dysphoria, and support activities in local communities to promote mutual respect, including the context of electoral campaigns. Oh my God. Electoral campaigns. They want to censor electoral campaigns now. We have to be respectful. What is this inclusive? If you're not so-called inclusive, you can be called out. You can be censored, your political campaign. And what's this xenophobic? Is it xenophobic because you want to put your people and country first? This is very dangerous language, everyone. Very dangerous language. It's talking about censoring political candidates, political parties in electoral campaigns. Unbelievable. And this aspect here, it says, this is one of the most troubling aspects of this. And this is about censorship and control of media, including internet media. It says, quote, promote independent, objective, quality reporting of media outlets, including internet-based information, including by sensitizing and educating media professionals on migration-related issue and terminology. They want to control the words that the media uses. Investing in ethical reporting standards in advertising. Stopping allocation of public funding and material support to media outlets that systematically promote intolerance, xenophobia, racism, and other forms of discrimination towards migrants. And then they say in full respect for the freedom of the media. That's just doublespeak. This is unbelievable. They want to censor, they want to control the media, the internet media as well. And they will stop funding to anyone they deem as intolerant, xenophobic, discriminatory. Anyone who says put our people first. Anyone that says deport these irregulars, call them illegals. That may be deemed as discriminatory. This is very, very dangerous. And then you see the doublespeak. They say in full respect of media freedom. There's no media freedom there. It's all about controlling the media, even controlling the terminology they use. This is Orwellian. This is Orwellian. This is very dangerous stuff. I got a couple more here. And there's yeah. Yeah, that was the last one right here on the media. Sensitizing, educating the media. And they said so-called independent, objective quality reporting. So they're actually going to report on the media. They're going to monitor them, including internet. Wow. And that's already going on, as we all know. There's censorship on Facebook all the time. I know people getting censored. There's shadow banning going on. The federal government was working with Facebook to censor what they deemed as so-called fake news. And we all know the federal government just gave $600 million to the globalist mainstream media. And it just shows everyone what we said. This is a conglomerate, a globalist conglomerate in Canada. The globalist mainstream media is working with the globalist mainstream political parties. They're all in bed together. And that's why National Citizens Alliance, we're uncontrolled opposition. And what we noticed recently, the media, the globalist mainstream media will not cover us unless they can decisively spin us in a very negative light. For example, I was interviewed by Global News a couple of days ago from the Atlantic province, the Atlantic region, and they wanted to do something on one of our videos, and they were hoping to spin it in some kind of racist light, but they couldn't do that once I talked to the guy from Halifax, so they never published the story. It's the same in Red Deer. We were at Red Deer, and CTV interviewed us, and they couldn't get any dirt on us, and they ended up dropping the story. So that's how they operate. I'm going to shift. I want to just show our policy on the UN, because I want to show that there is hope. So this is at nationalcitizensalliance.ca. That's our main website. This is our UN policy. There's some good, interesting videos on foreign outflow and the billions of dollars being wasted on the UN. And we have a comprehensive UN Migration Pact video up there from mid-September. But these are the key things that we support the National Citizens Alliance as uncontrolled opposition and as a federal party that will be running in 2019. We support ceasing all voluntary funding to the United Nations and its affiliates. Reducing mandatory payments to the UN regular budget if the UN does not take concrete steps to address its internal issue, biases, and failed policies in continents like Africa, in the Middle East. And we are all well aware of the extreme bias to Israel. We support spending zero tax dollars on attaining a rotating two-term non-veto seat in the Security Council. That is a waste of money. The 5 primary Security Council members have veto. The non-security members have limited say. They can't even. They don't have a veto vote. So it's a waste of time. We will review all UN declaration, covenants, agreements, treaties, conventions, including the UN Migration Pact, that Canada is signatory to, and only supporting ones that are in the best interest of the Canadian people. And this review is long overdue. And as I mentioned, the UN Migration Pact will be scrapped, rescinded on day one. We will put a moratorium on all UN peacekeeping operations that involve Canadian participation. We do not support putting our Canadian troops in unnecessary harm's way, like what occurred in 1991 and 92 in Somalia, in which thousands of Canadian troops came home sick because of failed anti-malaria drug. We have no confidence in the UN. It has become an amoral institution, a globalist institution, and it's just part of the global world order. We support exiting from the United Nations in entirety, if that is the will of the Canadian people, through a binding national referendum. We will hold a national binding referendum, and if the Canadian people want to withdraw fully, we will. Finally, we will redirect all savings from reduced expenditure to the United Nations and its affiliates to paying off the growing federal debt that is now in excess of $657 billion and growing, over $1 trillion market debt, with over $30 billion a year in interest payments to the commercial and central bankers. So that's our UN policy. We've got a lot of likes on that policy, and we think that a lot of Canadians are supporting us on that issue. But as you can see from this UN Migration Pact, it is horrible what they're doing. The open borders, the erosion of Canadian sovereignty, pushing global citizenry on the Canadian people, censoring, controlling, monitoring the media, both the broadcast, radio, newspaper, and internet-based. Very troubling. And I'm just going to show the event here that we're hosting. So this is on December 8th, public rally against the United Nations and Global World Order, Edmonton. And it's starting at 2 p.m. And it's at the south end of the Sir Winston Churchill Square in Edmonton, Alberta. We want to hear from you. There will be speakers, and we will allow the public to speak. We're under the guidelines of the city of Edmonton, and they have strict guidelines. So obviously no racism, and we actually we're going to update the site there to make it very clear what the expectations are, because they can shut down the event if we exceed the expectations of the city of Edmonton, and they have pretty strict, stringent rules when it comes to rallies and free speech. We're on their property, and we have to honor what they're saying. So we want to work within their guidelines. And remember, the city of Edmonton has signed on to Agenda 230, so no one should be surprised by this. And but we hope to see as many people out on December 8th, Saturday, December 8th in Edmonton. And I understand in the morning in Ottawa, there is a similar rally. It's a separate entity, but it's taking place on Parliament Hill, I believe at 10 a.m. But if you live out east, consider going to that one as well. And like I said, this is a massive issue. United Nations and the global world order. I couldn't touch on everything today. I'd be talking for three to 5 hours if I touched on every issue. But I hope tonight that you learned a few things, and you have every right to be very concerned by the UN Migration Pact. But just remember, it is non-legal binding. It's voluntary. And a lot of the stuff that's going on with the UN Migration Pact is already going on. And I've got one last thing I want to share just to shed some more light on this before I sign off. It's unbelievable. The UN envoy, I just found this out, the UN envoy for the UN Migration Pact is Louise Arbour. She's a former Supreme Court judge of Canada. She's a former UN human rights envoy. So Canada has its fingerprints all over the UN Migration Pact. That's why I don't think Trudeau, there's no way he's not going to sign this. And there she is there, and she was attacking some countries that have pulled out. Australia, Israel, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland, Bulgaria have pulled out of this pact because they believe it erodes their country's national sovereignty, as I said. And here, this is Merkel. Apparently, she has her fingerprints on the UN Migration Pact. And she's the one that was allowing millions of migrants into Germany. And what a nightmare in that country. So globalist Merkel's also is in on this act. And it's interesting. The intent of this act, as they say, was not legally binding, but they were designed to be politically binding. They were hoping to embarrass countries that do not follow it from getting out of it. And but it's very concerning. Apparently, this contract has been in the work for a long time, and we agree with the Austrian government. They say we are only responsible to the Austrian population as government officials. Austrian sovereignty has top priority for us. This must be preserved and protected. And that's why they're pulling out of the pact. And that's what we believe. At National Citizens Alliance, we believe Canadian national sovereignty must be protected at all costs. And our people, our country must come first. And this UN Migration Pact, the United Nations, the global world order is all about eliminating our national sovereignty. So please come out on December 8th. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to wish you and your family the best. Thank you.